Campaigning continues for federal party leaders as we draw closer to the September 20th federal election, and apparently things have not been going very well for the Trudeau Liberals. To talk about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist, Mr. Brian Lilley. Brian, a lot of polls put this election closer than expected. What's your read on what Canadians are telling the pollsters right now?
Well, in many ways, they're telling them in an amplified form what they were telling pollsters ahead of time. As we talked about before the election was called, Hal, we saw everything from the Conservatives in the mid-20s to the low 30s, the Liberals from the low to mid-30s to the low 40s. It was all over the map. There was no consensus. And speaking to someone who's been in the polling game a long time, Darrell Bricker, the global CEO of Ipsos Public Affairs, he told me that the electorate was fragile, that it could break any way, that the fact that, his poll was showing a few points gap, others were showing double digits. He said, there's a lot of fluidity. People are moving around. The election's called, people focused in. And all of a sudden, you can't really say that Aaron O'Toole is lighting the world on fire because his polling numbers haven't gone up that much. But you can say that Justin Trudeau is lighting himself and the entire Liberal campaign on fire because their numbers are going down. O'Toole and Saint have come up a little bit. That's good for them. But bad news for the Liberals is they're polling down. Most polls are showing both the Liberals and the Conservatives within a couple of points of each other in the mid-30s, the low 30s. It ranges from 30, 32, 31, 33. The biggest gap you'll see is a 3 or a 4-point gap at this point, and the 4-point gap is the outlier at this point. So a lot of downward movement for the Liberals and voters waiting to see, if I'm not going to vote for them, where am I going to go?
So is there anything specific that's taken place during the Liberal campaign? You credit them with being solid campaigners, but so far, this campaign, Justin Trudeau has been all over the place.
So a couple of things. At the start of the campaign, he called it on the Sunday that Kabul fell in Afghanistan. And really, Afghanistan in many ways has dominated a lot of headlines for the government since this began. And I got to say, our rescue efforts of our former interpreters, contractors, people who helped and aided the Canadian government, even Canadian citizens, people who went back to bring over family members and weren't expecting the Taliban to take over Kabul so quickly. All of that rescue effort, all of the visuals that we're seeing, it's dogged the government, and their response has not been good. I wish it was. This is something I don't want them to fail on. I want them to succeed, but it has been exceedingly poor. On top of that, they thought that the whole question of why did you call the campaign and it's an early election, they thought, as I did, that would be a 1 or 2 day story. And yet we're not quite 15 days in, but we're 10 plus days in, and we're still talking about it. So this is something that nobody was expecting. So people are saying, why did you call the election? And the Liberals don't have a good answer. They don't even have a good answer for their campaign. Right now, the old saying in politics is you get the job you campaign for. And Justin Trudeau is campaigning as if he wants to be the opposition leader. He's campaigning against Aaron O'Toole, a guy he was supposed to beat handily. So I've been talking to Liberals. They know that their campaign's in trouble. They're hoping to get their platform out soon. The Prime Minister was in Hamilton the other day. He's off in Vancouver now. We'll see where he goes after this. But they need to get their platform out. They need to get their messages straight. And they need to stop talking about Aaron O'Toole so much because it's giving him an awful lot of advertising. Aaron O'Toole's positivity ratings in polls are going up, and Justin Trudeau's are going down.
Well, let's talk about Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole and his campaign for just a moment here, Brian. What is he doing right so far, and where do you think he might be a little more vulnerable?
So before the election campaign, a lot of people were saying, where's Aaron O'Toole? I don't see him. He's in hiding. He's not doing anything. No, we now know what he was doing. He was preparing. He was out doing runs all the time. He's lost a bunch of weight. He's very fit. He is focused. And so is his campaign. This is a guy who at 7 o'clock every morning, his social media platform is populated with a 30-second video elevator pitch. It's on whatever the message of the day is. So if they're talking housing affordability, that's the 30-second video that shows up. If they're talking protecting workers' pensions, which is one of their platforms that I think will be very popular on Main Street, not very popular on Bay Street, that's the video message that shows up. a news release goes out. There is a news conference later in the day, normally a rally at night or a telephone town hall where he talks to thousands and thousands of people. So this is a well-oiled machine so far. I mean, things can change, but this, we're talking 10 or so days in. This is a very well-organized campaign. Compared to the Liberals, the visuals don't look good. They can't stay on message. O'Toole is staying on message. Where he has problems is the issue that the Liberals tried to knock him on, and that is private delivery of healthcare. He's got a very good answer. He's got to lean into it the way Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe did, and that is in saying, look, I'm not against private delivery of healthcare services like the private MRI clinics that have a 2-for-1 deal. For every 2 MRIs they do, they have to do 1 for the public sector. That's what they did in Saskatchewan. It cleared a backlog of more than 10,000 MRIs. That's like, how is that a bad thing? That's a good thing. He's got to lean into that and say he's not against private delivery of services. If people don't know, their family doctor is a private clinic. The abortion clinics that Trudeau talks about all the time needing funding are private clinics. So the Liberals aren't opposed to private delivery. They just want it for certain things. O'Toole has to own this issue. Otherwise, he will be vulnerable there.
Now, you feel that NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has also been running a fairly tight campaign, but not quite as tight as O'Toole. Can you explain?
His message delivery isn't as polished. Jagmeet Singh can be a good speaker off the cuff at times. Other times he fumbles around. And so, the other day, Justin Trudeau was in the very wealthy suburb of Ancaster. It's a suburb of Hamilton, Ontario, that is, he was surrounded by homes that cost $1.3 million and talking about housing affordability. Well, Jagmeet Singh was in Hamilton as well. And he was trying to make the point that, on housing affordability, very real issue, that, Trudeau's had 6 years. It took him 3 attempts to get the message out. He should have those lines down pat. He should be a bit better. When he's on, he's very good at delivering those. Other times, he can't get out the soundbite that he wants to deliver. Outside of that, the NDP got their platform out early. They're staying on message. They're delivering a policy of the day, much like the Conservatives, and they're getting some traction. Jagmeet Singh just has to become a bit more polished at how he delivers that message. Very interesting contrast between the 2 main opposition parties and the Liberals. 2 very disciplined campaigns and one that's still trying to find its footing.
Brian, let's talk about some of the other smaller parties like the Maverick Party, Maxime Bernier's PPC, or the Green Party. Will they make any inroads this election campaign?
Well, the Green Party will probably make outroads, possibly right out of Parliament. I think they had 3 MPs going into the election. I don't know. They had 2. They had previously had 3, but one of them decided the party wasn't anti-Semitic enough and decided to join the Liberals. So that was a bizarre episode there. And since then, they've been at war with themselves over Israel and anti-Semitism. They elected a Black Jewish woman as their leader, and then suddenly all these people who are hardcore anti-Israel came out of the woodwork to fight her. So I think the Greens are going to be toast after this election. Not a bad thing. I've never found them to be much more than an Elizabeth May vanity project or a media creation at times. Maxime Bernier's People's Party, there's another vanity project. I don't expect it to go anywhere. We were told that they were going to make inroads in the last election, and there were polls that had them up high enough to get into the leaders' debates. But then they got, less than 2% of the vote? I don't expect them to do much better this time. The Maverick Party, that's a different story. Like the Bloc Québécois, it's regional based, regional focused. I know that Conservative MPs in Alberta and Saskatchewan, they're concerned. They're more concerned about that than anybody else or anything else, unless they're in one of the traditional NDP type ridings. They see the Maverick as potentially pulling away enough votes that it could make things dangerous for them. But Maverick would be the only one. I don't see them electing an MP because they don't seem well organized enough, but we'll see how the campaign goes. As I always say, campaigns matter. And if somebody is a good local star, they might break out in the next couple of weeks, and you'll have to be on the ground to be able to see that.
We've actually interviewed Jay Hill, the interim party leader of the Maverick Party, and a lot of what he says resonates with us here in the West. Brian, let's circle back to Maxime Bernier for just a moment of the People's Party of Canada. He was recently denied admission to the televised leaders debate that you were discussing earlier. Some people refer to it as a bit of a snub. Is this not a problem in a democratic country?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the United States has televised debates all the time, and they're organized by a commission, as are ours now. And they don't invite every party to put up their candidate. I never would have allowed Elizabeth May on stage, and I'm not sure why the Bloc Québécois is ever in the English language debates. As a former Anglo-Quebecer, I lived there for a few years, and I'm an Anglophone. The Bloc Québécois does not attempt to get the votes of Anglophones, and the Anglophone votes they do get, they're from very strange people who have odd political views and don't like their own people living in Quebec. It's very strange. So, no, like Elizabeth May shouldn't have been in. She never has had recognition as an official party in Parliament. Maxime Bernier got less than 2% of the vote last time. He's run in by-elections recently where he ran in one here in Toronto. I don't think he got more than 700 votes. So, if we started allowing everyone that got 700 votes to appear, we'd have the Communist Party of Canada, we'd have the Marxist-Leninist Party, you'd have 15 different leaders up there, and nobody would have any clue what was going on. My bigger problem is that we've gone to a debate commission selected by the government. That's something that I think is very problematic. Craig Kielburger was formerly on the debate commission until the whole WE scandal came about. I have real problems with partisans like that going on the debate commission.
Now let's talk a little policy here. One of the big issues is affordable housing, which you mentioned earlier. So many young people today, Brian, have no chance of buying a home, especially in regions like Vancouver and Toronto. Where do the party leaders stand on affordable housing?
Well, I'll tell you how. This is becoming an issue well outside of the core cities, and it's going pretty much everywhere in the country. When you lived here in Southern Ontario, it was a Toronto problem. Well, when Justin Trudeau was elected in 2015, the NDP pointed this out today. He was in Hamilton talking about affordable housing. When he was elected in 2015, the average home price in Hamilton was $415,000. That's an astronomical amount. It's now $882,000
Wow.
6 years later. That's great if you bought in and you can sell and don't need to buy another house. That's horrible for anybody trying to get into the market or somebody trying to upgrade. Maybe you bought a starter home, your family's getting bigger. This is why this is such a big issue. Affordability in general, the cost of housing. So they've all promised to do one thing, and that is ban new foreign ownership. There's been a lot of money coming in from out of the country that sees real estate in Canada as an investment opportunity. There's also money coming in from overseas that sees Canada as a place to launder money through real estate, which is a real problem that law enforcement hasn't been able to get a handle on. And I don't think government has helped them yet in terms of dealing with that. So they've all promised that. The Conservatives have promised to, make as much as 15% of federal land, including some surplus buildings, available for housing. They're even talking about if there's an old office building they don't need and it can be converted into housing, maybe you turn it into apartments or condos or something. And they're talking about it in ways of affordable housing for people who are low income and need a place to rent and subsidies with that, but also affordable housing in terms of making it affordable for people to buy a home. The NDP is talking about social housing, co-ops, making that easier to do. Those are all very solid things. The Liberals talked about a number of things that had them referred to as criminalizing home owners. And the Real Estate Association in Ontario blasted them, saying they were going to use the criminal code to punish people who were just trying to sell their homes. So that's the one policy that fell flat among the three in terms of trying to fix what is a very real problem in Canada.
So, Brian, if the Conservatives do pull it off and win the election, maybe a minority government or a majority, do you think they would actually show support to our energy sector like Aaron O'Toole has said in the past and maybe roll back Bill C-68 and C-69, who many people still refer to as the anti-pipelines bill?
I call it the No More Pipelines bill, and I hope that he would. I think that he would. He has talked about that in the past, and people like me, my colleague in the Edmonton Sun, Lauren Gunter, we would be holding him to account to try and say, you've got to do this, you promised it. If we don't get rid of bills like that, there will be no more pipelines. And even if you believe in a totally green future, we're not there yet. We're going to continue to need oil. We're going to continue to need natural gas. We need to be able to provide these products to market. Canadian natural gas could be replacing coal plants in India and China. And so if lowering global emissions is your issue, well, guess what? Sending liquefied natural gas to these Asian markets that still use a lot of coal is part of the answer. Shutting them down and allowing OPEC countries to spew out their oil with limited, if any, environmental concerns and conditions, that's not the answer.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.